Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, um, I does any branch of the United States government or defense contractors possess technology?
Sir, there's documentation that I believe was submitted for the record that was approved for release by the U.S. Pentagon, by the Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, and it states one of the reasons why my predecessor program, OSAP, was trying to collect material of unknown origin.
Was it successfully collected?
It was not. What happened is that there was an aerospace contract company that requested to divest itself of the material that was collected in the 1950s. Unfortunately, that didn't actually occur.
So let's dive into that. That's the Bigelow Aerospace, correct? So
Yes, sir.
There was a journalist, Christopher Sharp, who said that there was a transfer between Lockheed Martin, Bigelow Aerospace, and the CIA allegedly blocked this. Can you describe that?
What I can say is that it was blocked. Why it was blocked, I can only surmise. I was part of some conversations later on with some of those contract personnel where they had told all of us that is accurate. What we required was a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force in order to make that complete, and that never occurred. And so when Secretary Mattis became Secretary of Defense, I decided it would be appropriate for me to try to receive a memo from him as SecDef, as Secretary of Defense, if we could not get a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force to transfer that material.
So if that material exists today, who's in possession?
Sir, I wouldn't be able to have that conversation in an open hearing. We'd probably have to have that.
Okay, my question to you then is, if we were in a secure setting, if we were in a SCIF, would you be able to provide or get access to something, whether it's visuals or material that we could put our hands on, or biologics that would convince me, that would show me that we have non-human origins?
Sir, that decision would not be mine. That would be to the gatekeeper still in the U.S. government.
And who would so if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information? A lot of times we just don't know who to ask because we don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established Aero for that very purpose. And unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. So one would hope that they would have the authorities necessary to do that. Let's hope that this new iteration of leadership will be successful.
In the discussions, it's simply about material, or is there discussion about it was previously testified that there was biologics that were collected. Are you aware of any of that?
I am, sir, aware of the reporting that biologics have been recovered. Again, my focus was more nuts and bolts, looking at the physical aspects of these phenomenon, how they interacted around military equities and nuclear equities. So I'm certainly not a medical expert. I would not be able to probably provide you a whole lot of value in that simply because I don't have the expertise.
But was anything described as that we have possession of bodies?
Yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures, or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologics is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Okay. Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace. And they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities and our nuclear readiness.
Is the United States government or in our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? Or they're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. Again, I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would like to recognize Mr. Timmons for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, you just said something interesting. You said they don't seem to be hiding. They don't seem to be hiding. The UAP sightings are becoming increasingly brash, if you will. And, you know, we've been hearing about these for years, but they've generally been isolated and not as consistent and over critical military installations. Would you say that's fair? Is this becoming increasingly often? Is it happening more and more?
Great question, sir. Let me see if I can answer this for you. Certainly, there seems to be some indication that they're being provocative, meaning that they're, in some cases, literally splitting aircraft formations right down the middle. So that's an air safety issue. The question is it the frequency increasing? And really the response is it depends. Yes, it's possible that there is an increase in frequency, but it's also possible that there's heightened awareness now, and there's also more pervasiveness of technology out there that's collecting this information and that can record this information. So we're not quite sure yet if it's actually an increase in numbers of these events, or is it that we have better equipment now that to record these things, and we have a better ability, if you will, to analyze these things.
And that's my next question. It seems that a lot of these sightings occur near military installations. Do you think that these UAPs are intentionally targeting military installations, or do you think that we have increased abilities to monitor surrounding the military installations?
Sir, maybe both. Part of my concern is we have something in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community called IPB, Initial Preparations of the Battle Space. And we use equities like ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and other type of equities and technologies to prep the battle space. And certainly, you know, if I was wearing my national security hat, even if there was a 2% chance that there was some sort of hostile intent here, that's 2% higher than we really can accept. And so we must figure out, there's a calculus, capabilities versus intent, in order to identify if something is a national security threat. We've seen some of the capabilities, yet we have no idea in the intent. And so this is why this discussion is somewhat, I think, problematic from a governmental perspective, because we have no idea.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Schellenberger, you're particularly familiar with the Langley Air Force Base incident a year ago? Are you familiar?
Just from what I read in the
Just
news.
from what you've read?
Yeah.
I would imagine a large percentage of the American population became aware of that with the Wall Street Journal article. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And were you aware of that incident prior to the Wall Street Journal article?
No.
To the rest of the panel, was the Wall Street Journal article the first time that y'all were made aware of what was essentially an over 2-week UAP frenzy over Langley Air Force Base? Were y'all aware of this prior to the Wall Street Journal article? Anybody? Show of hands. Yes,
sir.
Dr. Guyette, could you give me how did you become aware of it?
A colleague of mine who I referenced previously, Chris Mellon, he wrote an extensive article about this, that there were other incursions of drones over Langley before this, as well as many, many military installations over the last 5 decades.
And it's my understanding that there's been an ever increasing in number, and trying to think how to say this because I wear 2 different hats. I'm still in the Air Force. So, I mean, it seems that they're becoming increasingly brash. And the question that we really have to figure out is it China or is it non-human? And I think that's the biggest question the American people want to know. If it's China, it's scary because they have a lot of technology that we cannot explain. And if it's non-human, that's scary because we don't know the intent. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, Congressman. And in fact, I really believe that we should use this hearing as a catalyst to improve and bolster our air defense capabilities and our maritime domain awareness capabilities, because obviously there are holes in it, whether it be UAP of non-HI direction or NHI direction, or like as you say, sir, China or any other adversary.
Are you all aware of any task force at the Pentagon or in the national security apparatus that's trying to assess the answer to that question?
At the current moment, sir, no, but this is a great point. From 2020 to 2022, there was a UAP task force in the DoD succeeding where Mr. Elizondo worked, led by Jay Stratton, who had the first comprehensive whole of government approach to UAP, which involved pathways to declassification and to increase transparency, as well as assessing the national security risks of UAP. This was a really well-established approach, and we have all advocated that something like it
Thank you.
return.
I'm running out of time. The last thing is that we need authorities. The law enforcement, military do not have authorities to actually engage, and Congress needs to act to give those authorities to local law enforcement and the military so they have clear guidelines on how to assess these issues going forward. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Ms. Boebert for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that we have all been cautioned in this committee hearing that the mention of Pentagon's Immaculate Constellation program could put us on a list, well, I already find myself on many lists, I'm sure. So I speak my mind often, so why not just keep going with it? May as well just go all out and say it. The earth is flat, birds are government drones, and we've never set foot on the moon, and Joe Biden received 81 million votes in the 2020 election. So let's just see how many lists we could get on here today. But Mr. Schellenberger, I wanted to ask you, I think I understand from this hearing that you would agree that classifying information like this is not in the best interest of the people. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, with the caveat that, of course, I would support classification necessary to protect secrets essential to national security, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's overclassification.
Overclassification, yes. And so in most instances, if they can't tell us what, do you think at some point they'll at least tell us why?
President-elect Trump has repeatedly committed to greater transparency, both on the UAP issue, on JFK files, on
Yes.
COVID origins, and many other things. So I think that we need to make sure that the next administration is held accountable for that.
Agreed. And this is for all four of you. Yes or no, please. I have many questions I want to get to. Are there any known instances of recovered materials or technologies that are not of human origin and maybe connected to any advanced bioscience defense programs within the USG?
I don't know.
I wouldn't be able to answer that, ma'am.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, so there are rumors that have come up to the Hill of a secretive project within the Department of Defense involving the manipulation of human genetics with what is described as non-human genetic material, potentially for the enhancement of human capabilities, hybrids. Are any of you familiar with that? Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
I am not, ma'am.
I'm not.
No, ma'am.
Okay, I would like to know with Immaculate Constellation, how does this relate to UAP activities, Mr. Schellenberg, in oceanic environments? Are there any instances where the Navy or other maritime forces have encountered UAPs that could not be explained by known technology or natural phenomena?
Yeah, the Immaculate Constellation covers both terrestrial and oceanic, and there's actually a number of cases described in the report that occur in the ocean.
And do you believe that there is a concerted effort by the Pentagon to keep Congress out of the loop regarding these UAP activities, specifically in our waters?
Yes.
I think it's about 5% of our ocean that's actually been studied in detail by man, and we've studied more of space than we had of our own oceans. And so are there any accounts of UAPs emerging from or submerging into our water, which could indicate a base or presence beneath the ocean's surface?
I don't know about a base, but as I mentioned, I had a different source entirely describe this pretty extraordinary footage that exists of orbs, of an orb coming out of the ocean and being met by another orb.
Some would say that there's multiple hotspots where we see frequent activity. So in your investigations, have you come across any data or visual evidence like sonar readings or underwater footage of these UAPs?
I have not beyond what's in the report.
You've written about UAPs not only in the air, but in underwater. Are there any specifics on what you've learned about the UAP activity in our oceans. Particularly, have you spoken with sources who have provided any evidence or eyewitness accounts of these UAPs interacting with our naval forces or being detected by our underwater surveillance systems?
Nothing beyond what's in the report and then the specific case that I mentioned with the orb.
So this report says it all. There's no other information that we are aware of regarding the activity within our waters.
I have other sources that have told me that have shared a significant amount of information, but they're not comfortable with me sharing it at this point.
Okay. Are there any technological capabilities observed in these oceanic UAPs that seem to defy our current understanding of physics or our engineering capabilities?
It seems like they all do.
Yes, I would agree with that. My time is up, but I do appreciate your bravery, your courage for coming here and speaking today. And seems like there's still some questions that we need answers to, and we will not relent until we get those to the American people. Thank you all.
Thank you. I move to allow myself and the ranking member 5 additional minutes for questions without objection, so ordered. Mr. Elizondo, were you read into the Immaculate Constellation program?
Ma'am, I would not be authorized to confirm nor deny the existence of any ongoing or past program, especially as it relates to a special access program, either by name or trigraph.
Okay, and then does the U.S. government or private contractors, do they work with other foreign countries, China, for example, to exchange data, quote from a source, that intelligence data about UAP?
Let me see if I can answer that a little bit more generally, ma'am, if I
Mhm.
may. We do have foreign material exploitation programs. That is something that is widely known, and that term itself is unclassified. How exactly that works becomes a bit sensitive. The discussion we could certainly have in a closed session if you like. We do work with international partners and allies quite often, not just in military exercises and
Mhm.
workups, but in other intelligence efforts as well.
In terms of material that's given to private contractors, is certain material given to certain contractors because of their experience? So for example, if it's related to submerged and undersea propulsion, would it go to a general contractor like General Dynamics?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely correct. Different contractors have different levels of expertise.
What's
Uh,
Lockheed's expertise
Aerospace, ma'am.
in the UAP space? That's all that
But
they wouldn't do submerged.
no, I didn't say that, ma'am.
Okay.
Lockheed Martin and others do quite a bit of work, both in our atmosphere, in space, and even underwater. There are certain efforts to. It's a tough question you're asking. You put me on the spot here.
I'm looking for the answer.
Yes, ma'am. No, they are involved in a lot. I would rather let Lockheed Martin explain the different domains that they are involved with. Probably am not authorized to discuss that, but they are involved in a lot of different areas and domains.
Admiral,
environments.
flight safety risks for our pilots, based on what you've experienced and seen in your career.
They're extensive. And the one exercise I referred to where I received the email that was then deleted was the pilots. And this is worth bringing out. There are debunkers out there who have said the Go Fast video was just a balloon. That was only one video that was released. There were dozens of these encounters that pilots and friends of Ryan Graves, who's in this room right here, witnessed and caused significant safety concerns. And to almost call out and exercise it and shut it down, which is very compressed, and the carrier's getting ready for deployment, and the pilots have to get certified to land on the carrier. It's extreme, to say the least.
All right, I have 2 last questions. Real quickly, Mr. Schellenberger, how do we get more whistleblowers to come forward?
Well, this hearing is very important, and obviously, I can't encourage whistleblowers to obtain information, but I can guarantee that I will protect them and go to prison to protect their identities if they come
Okay.
to me.
Yes, sir. Okay, my last question. The first hearing we had on this, I'd never been briefed on UAPs or what they were, biologics, non-human, et cetera. How would you define, each of you, my last question, how would you define non-human biologics, non-human intelligence? What are we actually talking about? Admiral, and we'll go down the line.
I don't think it's a stretch when you look at the diversity of life on this planet and the size of this universe to think that there would be more diverse, higher order, non-human intelligences throughout the universe. And that's probably what's visiting us.
I would take the scientific approach. The definition would be the ability to react to a stimulus in a manner that requires an intellectual thought process.
I just don't know.
I think we must be modest in our assumptions that we're looking for intelligence. That could be biological, it might not.
Non-biological, but what non-biological intelligence, what does that mean though?
Artificial intelligence, ML, machines. We assume that all intelligence would be like us. And every time we look out in the universe, we are humbled relative to what we don't know in terms of the forms of intelligence and what it may take. I can assure you, I probably can't ask you your question, but I think the ultimate answer is going to surprise us all.
And then Mr. Garcia, you had a few closing remarks.
And I know we're about to hit votes here, so I'll be brief. Just, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Chairwoman Mace especially for holding this important bipartisan hearing. And I want to thank all the committee members that are interested in this topic. I think our commitment to all of you and all the folks that have contacted us, and certainly to the advocates and the pilots, is that we need to continue investigating UAPs. I think the country the country is owed explanations and ensure that the safety or national security is always protected. This is a conversation and questioning that must continue. So I'm very grateful to all of you. And I also just want to add, just personally, I think it's really important for me, two things guide my questioning and my observations on UAPs. One is we should always be guided by facts, science, and data, and stay serious on those issues. And the second thing is I think that we should not limit our imagination and our thoughts and our curiosity on what UAPs could actually be. And I think those two things for me are really important, and I'm grateful for all of you to be here. So with that, I yield back.
Okay, and we have Mr. Ogles who is on the way. He's going to be here any second. Is that correct? Want to check, and he'll be the last last member with questions that we have today, and then we have votes. So we want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Mr. Garcia and folks on both sides of the aisle for being here today and being patient. We have a lot more questions, and I hope that this will open the door to more hearings in the future. I obviously would like to know how much taxpayers are spending on this. You have the right to know, but also if we're spending money on something that doesn't exist, why are we spending the money? And if it does exist, why are we hiding it from the public? And of course, our national security is a huge issue, because if there's technology that could harm us or our allies that are in the hands of our adversaries, we obviously want to stay ahead of that to the best of our ability to ensure that that technology is not in the hands of someone who could use it against us or our allies anywhere in the world. So, Mr. Ogles, you're just in time, babe. I will recognize you for 5 minutes of questioning before we head on out today.
Well, thank you all for being here. And Madam Chairwoman, I'm out of breath because I sprinted to get here, but this is an important hearing. I think we all know that there's something going on. Mr. Elizondo, based on your knowledge of UAP sightings, do you believe it's fair to say that they are especially common near nuclear sites?
Yes, sir. Mr. Congressman, I absolutely am convinced of that, as are my colleagues inside the government.
And the reason why I pose that question, and this has been one of my talking points from the beginning, is, Oak Ridge is in Tennessee. The so-called weather balloon that drifted, that we now know was controlled, it passed near Oak Ridge. It obviously is a sensitive site, both of interest to our adversaries and to whatever else this is. Because we know that at military installations, at sensitive locations, such as nuclear facilities, that we're seeing this take place. So the question is what is it? Do you believe they've caused an irregular activity, and why might they be interested in those sites?
Sir, in some cases, it's actually regular activity. You'd be surprised. There's actually documentation right now that's been submitted. It's not just Oak Ridge. It's Savannah River site, SRS. It's also Los Alamos. A lot of our sensitive R&D locations appear to be under some sort of surveillance and monitoring. Why? Well, because a lot of innovation comes out of those areas, a lot of new technologies, a lot of, if you will, disruptive technologies that we use for our national defense originates out of those locations, and advanced concepts in physics as well. So if I was doing any type of reconnaissance, even on a foreign adversary, that's a great target to start with.
Sure, and again, this has been one of my talking points. I do have questions. What role might the Department of Energy or its subsidiaries or affiliates have in this type of technology, or possessing this type of technology, whether it's ours or others? Mr. Gallaudet, I think your testimony has been pretty clear, but would you please reiterate that do you believe UAPs pose a threat to pilots? Excuse me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. They were threatening Navy pilots during the exercise that I was, my people were involved with in 2015. And it's my understanding they're risking pilot safety, commercial and military today.
Well, considering, and I understand that there's a need in some cases to keep certain technologies secret, but you believe that it is posing a threat to our personnel, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's reasonable to conclude that if there's a threat to our personnel who are serving our country faithfully, that there be oversight.
100%, Congressman. And in fact, that's the one thing that we've not talked about enough during this hearing is the fact that the government executive branch not sharing with Congress what it knows about UAP infringes on your legislative and oversight responsibilities to such an extent that's very concerning. I mean, what else are we, if you look at national security or intelligence or foreign affairs or appropriations, you all have oversight and legislative responsibility regarding those. This UAP issue may be the greatest issue of our time, and it's being hid from you.
Well, I mean, and to your point, I think we've seen over the decades that we have certain adversaries like China, like Russia, that technologically speaking are not as advanced as us, that they lack some of the lethality that we have, and that we've seen that they've gone after our technologies and in some cases succeeded, in particular with missile technology. And so again, my concern, whether this technology emanates from us or otherworldly, that we know that we possess it. And where's the accountability? Where are the stopgaps? What are the guarantees that if this were to fall in enemy hands, that it isn't immediately weaponized against us? And I'll say this, it is clear from my experience and what I've seen that there is something out there. The question is it ours? Is it someone else's? Or is it otherworldly? And Madam Chairman, I would posit that as the legislative body, as the regulatory body, we must know. And anyone who prevents us from gaining access to that information, I would consider that criminality. Because we have U.S. personnel who may very well be in harm's way. We have technology that ultimately may threaten our very existence. With that, Madam Chairman, I thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ogles. And with that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.